Hello. At Pratyancha today, we bring to you another piece by William Wordsworth. We have discussed the romantic in William Wordsworth, we have discussed the realist in him from the perspective of him being a romantic, and today the piece that I bring to you, which is entitled Resolution and Independence, it cannot be categorized in either of the categories. Yes, it is a romantic piece, it is a realist piece, and it is also a very spiritual, introspective, and philosophical piece. Resolution and Independence is one poem by Wordsworth where you can see that the poet in him struggled at times to come to terms with the problems that his poetic life presented him with. In this poem, Wordsworth introduces another character, an old man, and by way of the conversation both of these characters have, the poet and the old man, and also with the help of how he starts the poem, Wordsworth tries to address this thought inside of him that why do poets sometimes have the highs of joys and at other times the absolute lows of depression? Why is this life such a seesaw of these emotions that sometimes a poet feels that nothing could be better but that he's witnessing this grand, beautiful event and he or she is going to present it by way of words? And at other times, well, it seems very difficult to find joy in anything, and we are filled with sadness. And he thinks that poets go through the seesaw even more extremely than other people because poets are extremely sensitive human beings. Poets are people who think deeply about anything, be it a joy or be it sadness. So this is the theme of the poem, that he is trying to understand that how do we resolve this problem? How do we reach a resolution of this problem? That sometimes there is great joy inside of me and at times I'm very despondent. And why does he also use the word independence? Because he wishes to suggest here that if we face a certain problem, once we have reached its resolution, we feel that we have freed ourselves of the problem. We have a sense of independence inside of us. And this is what he speaks of in this particular piece entitled Resolution and Independence. So let's begin with the piece. The first stanza says, "There was a roaring in the wind all night. There was a roaring in the wind all night. The rain came heavily and fell in floods. But now the sun is rising calm and bright. The birds are singing in the distant woods." Very simple to understand that he is explaining that nature around him is at work and as beautifully as possible. So he says that the wind was roaring all night. It rained also, and in floods it rained too much that the city was flooded. But now the sun is rising calm and bright. But the morning is very clear. The sun is rising calm, which means there are no clouds or lightning or thunder, and it's very bright. You can see the bright light of the sun. The birds are singing in the distant woods, and bird chirping is heard around me. Over his own sweet voice the stock dove broods. The jay makes answer as the magpie chatters, and all the air is filled with pleasant noise of waters. The stock dove, the jay, the magpie are common birds seen around him, and he refers to them that I can hear to their chirping. I can hear their chirping, and I can also hear the sound of water around me. Maybe there is a river, maybe there is a waterfall, and the bright sun, a clear day, the birds chirping, a lovely morning, and the sounds of water. How can life be more beautiful? And the romantic in him is in full glow here, is in full steam here as he writes about this particular scene that he sees in nature. Let's go ahead and look at the second stanza. All things that love the sun are out of doors. All things that love the sun are out of doors. The sky rejoices in the morning's birth. The grass is bright with raindrops on the moors. The hare is running races in her mirth. And with her feet she from the plashy earth raises a mist that glittering in the sun runs with her all the way wherever she doth run. This stanza again extends what was explained in the first stanza, that all things that love the sun are out of doors. See, this poem is situated in very cold climates, and there a sunny day is anytime very, very welcome. We're not talking about the Indian summer here. We're really talking about a summer day in in England, where also there is no season for monsoon. It rains anytime and every time. So to have a clear, bright day which is warm is all the reason to be outdoors. It's the reason to rejoice. It's the reason to feel happy. So he extends this and says that all the things that like the outdoors, that like being in the sun, have come out. The sky rejoices in the morning's birth. The sky is rejoicing in the morning's birth, the birth of the morning, that the morning has come about. The sky is very happy, it's blue and it's clear. The grass is bright with raindrops on the moors. The hare is running races in her mirth, and there is a hare running around, and mirth is happiness. The hare is running around with happiness. And with her feet, she from the plashy earth raises a mist. As this animal runs, the dust and perhaps a little bit of water or moisture is also splashing around, and you see that there is a mist created in the air, and that mist is glittering in the sun, and the mist runs with her all the way. So you don't see the hare just running, but you see that the mist is covering it throughout its run. So it's a poetic way of saying that the mist is also running with the sun, and wherever she doth run. So wherever the hare goes, the mist also goes. So these are the first two stanzas. Let's look at the third stanza. I was a traveller then upon the moor. I saw the hare that raced about with joy. I heard the woods and distant waters roar, or heard them not, as happy as a boy. The pleasant season did my heart employ. My old remembrances went from me wholly, and all the ways of men so vain and melancholy. Here he's saying that I chanced upon this scene one day. I saw this bright day. I'm a traveller through life, and I chanced upon a bright day where I saw the hare running, and the hare was running with joy. And then I also heard the woods, or the animals, the birds in the woods, and I also heard the waters in the woods, the distant waters roar. And then he's saying, or possibly I did not hear all of this. I was just happy as a boy. I heard some of these things, maybe I did not hear some of these things, but I was as happy as a boy, as a little boy who's free of all cares that adulthood brings. And I was happy as a boy. The pleasant season did my heart employ. I really rejoiced in the pleasantness of the season around me, and whatever used to bother me, any old thoughts or memories that were not very pleasant, that were perhaps melancholy, that were sad, or that were vain. They were waste. One should not give a thought to them, but maybe I was still thinking about them. In this particular situation, I was able to rid myself of all this, and my heart grew very pleasant in consonance with the pleasantness around me. I felt very happy in this clear day with the waters and the birds and the animals around me, and I felt that I was freed from my troubles. I felt joyous as a boy. I felt unfettered as a boy. Let's look at the next stanza. But as it sometimes chanceth from the might of joys and minds that can no further go, as high as we have mounted in delight, in our dejection do we sink as low. And there he says that I realize this, that as a poet, the nature around me, the mere observation of such beautiful things can raise my spirit. And it can raise my spirit to such an extent that we mount in delight. We go high when we are feeling joyous. But at the same time, I know that by chance, joys can go no further and they start to dip. And when they start to dip, I touch lows. I come to great lows in life. To me, that morning did it happen so, and fears and fancies thick upon me came. Dim sadness and blind thoughts I knew not, nor could name. And this is what happened to me that morning, that yes, I was in a very joyous mood. I was looking at this nature around me, and I felt that I had been freed of all the thoughts of vain and melancholy that I might have had. But then suddenly I did not know what happened. I cannot even name what all thoughts came upon me. But there came upon me fears and fancies. There came upon me certain ideas and fears. And I simply could not rid myself of this particular emotion. And this morning I felt, if the highs of joy, I also felt the lows of depression. Then he goes ahead to say, I heard the skylark wobbling in the sky, and I bethought me of the playful hare. Even such a happy child of earth am I, even as these blissful creatures do I fare. Far from the world I walk, and from all care. But there may come another day to me, solitude, pain of heart, distress, and poverty. He's saying that dim sadness came upon me, and though he was still aware of the wonderful scenario, the wonderful context that he was a part of, where he could hear the skylark, this beautiful morning bird, where he could see the hare, or he thought of the hare, and he was happy as a child and as blissful as these creatures in nature. But he could not escape this thought that there may be a day when I would be filled with anxiety, when there would be solitude in my life, maybe I'm left alone, where perhaps my heart is paining, or where there is a lot of distress, or perhaps I come upon poverty. And he became very tensed with the uncertainty of future, and also the fact that there are times when you really cannot control what is happening around you, and though right now it seems that everything is perfect and there is a very happy occasion in life in just being in touch with nature like he was, but he cannot leave this thought behind that soon there may be a time or there may be an instant when he doesn't feel as happy, when perhaps there'll be a lot of problems in life. And this is something that he could not come to terms with. Now he goes ahead to say, my whole life I have lived in pleasant thought, as if life's business were a summer mood, as if all needful things would come unsought, to genial faith still rich in genial good. But how can he expect that others should build for him, sow for him, and at his call love him, who for himself will take no heed at all? Now, for the first time in this stanza, he mentions that he is struggling with the structure of reality. He is struggling with who created this reality and how did this person or this Godhead create this reality such that we all left to our own devices, while he doesn't really think that there are too many problems that we are facing. And it is evident because if you see here in the fifth line, the H of he is capitalized, which means there is a reference to the Godhead or someone who creates this reality. So now he's saying that all my life I have lived in pleasant thought. I've lived very nicely in pleasant thought, and as if life's business were a summer mood, as if it was summer all along, and I could be out on a clear, bright, shiny, sunny day like this, and it was all warm and wonderful. So I've lived like this all my life, and all the things that I needed just came to me. I didn't even have to ask for them because I felt I had a genial faith inside of me, good faith inside of me, and that emanated from the fact that in general I was a good soul. So things worked out for me. But how can he expect? And now he's wondering that fortunes don't remain the same for one person. Also, they are very different from a person to the next. So he's now wondering, the creator of the world, what does he expect? That we should build for him, sow for him, we are dedicating all our tasks to the Almighty or to the Creator. We do all these things for him, and at his call we love him as well. But then he doesn't seem to take any heed at all. Why is it that he turns his face away from us, or he feels, the poet feels that God turns his face away from us and does not take heed when we are in trouble, or does not really bring about this thing that, yes, you are cared for always and always. Because there are times when I feel that I'm not cared for. So this is basically the problem that Wordsworth is dealing with, the resolution of which and independence from which he needs to seek in this poem. That why is it that we cannot pass all our days in this joy, lost in this happiness? Why are there days when we are so sad, or when we come upon thoughts where there is no faith, where there is no trust, when we lose hope? Why is it that this sadness is also a part of human life? Then he goes on, and in this particular stanza, he will mention a poet who died very young, and perhaps there is a notion that he starved himself. Basically, it was an act of killing oneself, a suicidal act. And he really thinks of that poet here, and then mentions that these problems of the highs of joys and the low of depression are faced most by the poets. And in referring to this poet, he's talking about his struggle as well. I thought of Chatterton, the marvelous boy, the sleepless soul that perished in his pride, of him who walked in glory and joy, following his flow along the mountainside. By our own spirits are we defied. We, poets, in our youth, begin in gladness, but thereof come in the end despondency and madness. So he's referring to Chatterton, who perhaps was a little too proud and perhaps did some things which he shouldn't have done, and then eventually he killed himself. And he was a teenager still, he hadn't even gained adulthood, and he kills himself. And then there's a reference to another poet, and then also he says that he also just vanished into eternity. So is it the destiny of poets that they start in gladness, they start in happiness, but then they soon come to despondency, sadness, and eventually even madness? Is it that if we think very deeply about things, if we feel deep joy, then we also feel very deep sorrow? Is this the destiny of poets, that we have to face these two very extreme emotions? I think of P.B. Shelley's line here. He says that our sweetest songs are those that tell of the saddest thought. And this is what Wordsworth is struggling with here. And the reference is to a poet who commits suicide and another one who's also dead. And he's really saying that are the lot of poets meant for this particular destiny? And then he begins to introduce what will become the mainstay of the poem, or the turn in the poem, where he will now meet an old man. And he introduces this in the stanza. Now, up till now, it's just this introspection about what nature has offered to him, about a bright day, and then why he comes to a sad thought, and then ruminating about the sad thought, ruminating and really troubling oneself over this idea that why is there so much sadness in life, and if poets have more sadness than other people. So up to now we've seen that there is a lot of introspection in the poem. Now the poem takes a turn, and he will introduce this another character that he meets on the moor. Moor, this word is repeatedly in this particular piece by Wordsworth. Moor is basically a grassland, and it's a wild grassland in the highlands, and so this is where he chances upon this old man. Now whether it were by peculiar grace, a leading from above, a something given, yet it befell that in this lonely place, when I with these untoward thoughts had striven, beside a pool bare to the eye of heaven, I saw a man before me unawares, the oldest man he seemed that ever wore grey hairs. So now he comes to this old man in the moor. Now whether it be by peculiar grace, now he says there is a chance that the Almighty wanted to show me by mirroring my situation in another person, or by seeing another person of a different situation and thereby mirroring my struggles with that particular person. The Almighty was wanting to teach me a lesson, or give me an example of learning a lesson on my own. So he says it was peculiar grace maybe that I chanced upon this old man, a leading from above, a something given. So maybe God really decided, leading from above, he decided that let me give this experience to this poet. Yet it befell in this lonely place, when I with these untoward thoughts had striven. It was a very lonely place of the grassland, and I had striven there with these untoward thoughts, these thoughts which perhaps were not very pleasant, which should not have come, and which came uninvited. I with these thoughts came to this lonely place, and then beside a pool which was bare to the eye of heaven. The eye of heaven, the sun. There was a pool there, and it was bare to the eye of heaven, and I saw a man before me unawares. I saw this old man, and he had grey hair, but still he seemed far older than any other old man that I had seen. So I chanced upon this old man, and Wordsworth is saying that perhaps God willed it so. It was by grace that I chanced upon him. As a huge stone is sometimes seen to lie, couched on the bark top of an eminence. Wonder to all who do the same espy, by what means it could thither come, and whence? So that it seems a thing endued with sense, like a sea beast crawled forth that on a shelf of rock or sand reposeth there to sun itself. Now here he is describing how the old man looked. The feeling here is that the old man looked like some huge rock, because at times he was so stationary, or because the form he had curled his body into, and it seemed like a stone was lying there, and the stone was upon some hill, the bar top of some hill, of some eminence. So there did seem a head upon him, and he did seem like a rock to him, and as if on a mount there was another stone placed. So this is the form that he comes to in his head, looking at the old man, and he says, "Wonder to all who do the same espy, to set sight upon, to look at something. All people who look at this person, this old man, would be as surprised as I am right now." Espy is to, like I said, look upon someone. There was a game that we played in our childhood, and mostly everyone would call it I Spice, but actually the game's name is I Espy You. So it's I set my sight upon you. I set my eyes upon you. I have found you. So children would hide, and there would be one person who would go looking for these children who had hidden, and then the first person to be caught would be the person who would then count maybe till 10 behind a tree, while the others again hide, and then this guy comes and looks for these friends hidden somewhere. So the game is I Espy You. This is where the name comes from, but most of us call it I Spice in India. Anyways, so here the poet is saying that I'm really surprised looking at this old man in this very lonely place in this highland. Why has he come here, thither, here, and whence, where from? Where from has he come? So that it seems a thing endued with sense. He seems like a sensible thing. He seems like someone who's thinking very hard. What is he doing here? And the poet in these settings is very astonished to discover this old man. Like a sea beast crawled forth, there on a shelf of rock or sand reposeth. Reposeth is lying, resting. And in repose, reposeth is archaic usage of repose. Repose is to rest. So he feels it's like a giant sea beast, an animal of the sea, which has come to either the beach or to a rock on the edge of the sea, and is now lying there, and it's reposing or resting in the sun. So in all these metaphors that he's given for the old man, be it of the rock and the rock placed upon the bald head of some eminence, or be it a sea creature on the beach or on the side of the sea, the notion here is of a mass. Somehow the notion here is not of a person standing upright, but it's of a mass, and a mass that was barely moving. So the notion of the rock and of the resting creature, and of a mass gathered somehow that was there. Then he goes on to say, such seemed this man, not all alive nor dead, nor all asleep in his extreme old age. His body was bent double, feet and head coming together in life's pilgrimage, as if some dire constraint of pain or rage of sickness felt by him in times long past, a more than human weight upon his frame had cast. Now he explains that why did this thing, or this old man, seem to him like a rock, or like something which could barely move, or like a creature on the edge of an ocean which was resting. He says that the man did not seem alive or dead. He was so motionless that he seemed dead, but at the same time I could see that he was alive. And then it was extreme old age, and what had happened was that his back had bent so much that his head was near his feet. This is what life had done to him, that his back had completely bent and his head was near his feet, and both had come together in life's pilgrimage. So this man was on the journey of life, wanting to find his God, and therefore life's pilgrimage. But then what life's pilgrimage had done to him was that his head had come down to his feet. The backbone had completely turned, as if some dire constraint of pain or rage of sickness felt by him in times long past. So maybe this was some sickness that had come upon him, or something that life had ravaged him with. A more than human weight upon his frame had cast. So upon his frame, upon his body, such weight, this sickness or bad circumstances, untoward circumstances had put upon him that no human body could endure. And because this weight was put upon him and he lived to tell about it, or he lived to see it manifest in his body, you could see that his body was turned. So he must have suffered a lot in his life. That is what Wordsworth is thinking here. Himself he propped limbs, body, and pale face upon a long grey staff of shaven wood, and still as I drew near with gentle pace upon the margin of that Moorish flood, motionless as a cloud the old man stood, that heareth not the loud winds when they call, and moveth altogether if it move at all. So he, with his limbs and his body, was propped upon a stick or a staff of wood, and the wood had grayed. It was a shaven wood grey staff, basically a stick of wood, and he was propped upon it. He was holding it, as well as because his hands and feet would have been very close together given the position that he was in. So his limbs, body, and his pale face, they were all on this shaft of wood. And he was rather very still. He was quite motionless. It seemed as if he did not hear the winds that were howling around him, and he moved really little, if at all he moved. This was his motionlessness, that if at all he moved very, very little. And the poet started to go near this old man with a gentle pace. So he did not hurry his steps to reach the old man, but with a gentle pace he tried to approach the old man. At length, himself unsettling, he the pond stirred with his staff, and fixedly did look upon the muddy water which he conned. So, in some time, the poet observed, that the old man moved a little bit, and with this shaft, the stick of wood that he had, he tried to disturb the muddy water of the Moor's flood, and he tried to then concentrate as he was disturbing the water, as if he had been reading in a book, and now a stranger's privilege I took. So the poet is saying that he concentrated so hard as if he was looking through or poring over a book, and then the poet mustered some courage, and stranger's privilege, strangers come and ask these random questions, so he took the stranger's privilege and drawing to his side to him did say, and then I went to his side and I told him, this morning gives us promise of a glorious day. So I basically started to make some small talk with him, because the poet has made it very clear that he was rather surprised to find the old man there. He was wondering how he had come there, from where he had come, what was he doing there, and also the way the old man was really, really old and bent over, and then with a stick he is moving around the flood or the waters in the moor. So the poet is quite astonished, and maybe he wants to make small talk with this particular man. And he also has mentioned in the earlier stanza that I was perhaps going to take a lesson from this experience, and therefore it was by divine grace that I met this old man in the moor. So he asks him, or tries to make polite conversation, saying that, oh, it's a very nice day today, it's a glorious day today. And then the poet says, a gentle answer did the old man make, in courteous speech which forth he slowly drew, and him with further words I thus bespake, what occupation do you there pursue? This is a lonesome place for one like you. Ere he replied, a flash of mild surprise broke from the sable orbs of his yet vivid eyes. And then he says, the poet says that a very gentle answer the old man gave him. The poet heard the answer and then went on to ask him, what is this occupation that you're pursuing here? Because this seems to be a very lonely place for someone like you. What are you doing here? And before he replied, ere is before he replied, there was a mild surprise in his eyes that someone is trying to make conversation with him, and the eyes were rather vivid. His words came feebly from a feeble chest, but each in solemn order followed each, with something of a lofty utterance dressed, choice word and measured phrase above the reach of ordinary men, a stately speech, such as grave livers do in Scotland use, religious men who give to God and man their dues. Now the poet had just asked a question of the old man, and he inquired as if as though he wanted to know that what is the occupation that you're pursuing here, and what brings you here, because this is a very lonely place. And then the poet doesn't tell us what the old man said, but rather he tells us how the old man said what he said. So the old man, although spoke very feebly because he was very old, feeble, something which is not firm, something in which you can see the effect of weakness. And it came from a feeble chest, a feeble, weak chest, a weak disposition. And he could feel that the old man did not have much strength. But he said that the words were so well structured, one after the other. The words followed each other in a solemn order. Solemn, a very serious, a very calculated order. And it had the quality of a lofty utterance, as if someone was giving a stately speech, as if someone was speaking on the podium, addressing a whole nation. This was the sort of way he spoke to me. The way he chose his words and the way his utterance was. He chose each word very particularly and also measured the phrase, or thought about it, how this word will connect to the other words in the same phrase, and how the phrase would connect to the sentence, and all this is above the reach of ordinary men. So Wordsworth felt that this could not be an ordinary personality. He seems to have really learned his life lessons well, and he's speaking in a way which a simple person would not be able to make sense of, let alone appreciate. And then he uses a term such as brave livers do in Scotland use. This is basically to say that some people in Scotland speak like this. Liver is a person who lives in a certain way, and he's referring to a very certain personality trait which he feels that certain people in Scotland have. There is a suggestion that this could be a sarcastic usage, but basically he's wanting to tell us that he spoke in a fashion which wasn't of ordinary men. There was something very stately about him, very proud about him, and very dignified about him. And each word was chosen very specifically, was structured very, not arduously, was structured with a very distinctive thought, a determined mind that this is how I'm going to speak my sentence. So the old man spoke in such a way to Wordsworth. And then the poet goes on to say, he told that to these waters he had come to gather leeches, being old and poor, employment hazardous and wearisome, and he had many hardships to endure. From pond to pond he roamed, from moor to moor, housing with God's good help by choice or chance, and in this way he gained an honest maintenance. So he tells the poet that I go from moor to moor, or I go from one water body to another water body in another moor perhaps, to gather leeches. Leeches are blood-sucking animals, and these in the 18th, 19th century were used to treat a lot of illnesses. Bloodletting was done through the leeches, and there were many other ways in which they were used by medical practitioners or doctors. So the old man said that I come here to gather leeches. I collect the leeches and I take them and I sell them wherever they are required, and this is how I earn my maintenance. This is how I run my life. But the poet felt that this was employment hazardous and wearisome. It was a sort of job which had its dangers. Hazardous, something which is dangerous, and it was wearisome. An old man like him should not be doing this. He did not have the strength or the energy to be doing something of this sort. So he felt it was an employment which wasn't suitable for this man. And therefore, there were many, many hardships that the person had to endure. There were many difficulties that this old man had to face. But he felt that this gives him an honest earning in his life, and he comes to the moor to gather these leeches. The old man still stood talking by my side, but now his voice to me was like a stream, scarce heard, nor word from word could I divide, and the whole body of the man did seem like one whom I'd met with in a dream, or like a man from some far region sent to give me human strength by apt admonishment. And now Wordsworth says that sometimes it so happens that you have an experience or someone says something to you, and in the next moment you're lost in your thought. After that, you have no clue what the person is saying or what is happening around you. So a similar experience he has here, and he feels that the old man still stood talking by my side, but now his voice to me was like a stream. I just know that I heard his sound and in a continuous wave, but I could not really make sense of the words because I was lost in my own thought, and I felt that I had seen this man in my dream, or it seemed like an otherworldly experience that I was having, speaking this old man in this lonely mood who told me that he was a leech gatherer. And Wordsworth is rather astonished, and in this astonishment, he is shut out from the circumstance. He really doesn't now register that the old man is speaking of other things to him as well. And then he also adds a line saying that it seems to me that this man was sent to me to teach me a life lesson in human strength by apt admonishment, as if nature was trying to scold me. To admonish is to scold. So he mentions nature, Almighty, or the Godhead with the capital H-E, the H capital E in some stanzas before, in one of the stanzas before. So here he's saying that as if God was trying to scold me, to admonish me by sending me this example of this old man. We'll come to what he learned from the old man, but this is what Wordsworth felt then, and his demeanor at that point in time became introspective. He stopped listening to what the old man was saying any further. In this sense, this poem is rather autobiographical. This poem has a tone where the poet himself is a character in the poem and is letting you in on his very private thoughts or his private musings about how life is and how we find resolution to our problems. Next, he says, he with a smile did then his words repeat, and said that gathering leeches far and wide, he travelled, stirring thus about his feet the waters of the pools where they abide. Once I could meet with them on every side, but they have dwindled long by slow decay. Yet still I persevere and find them where I may. So the old man repeated his words with a smile and said that I go from more to more. I stir the waters, I move the waters so that I can see if there are any leeches and I collect them. And once there were a lot of leeches, I could meet them on every side, but now they've dwindled to become less in supply. Now they're less in numbers and maybe slow decay in their populations has occurred, yet I still persevere. But I still go on, I still make sure that I'm out there gathering them day after day. Persevere to do something till the time you feel that you've done it enough, or keep doing something. Persevere to continue to do something, and I find them where I may. While he was talking thus, the lonely place, the old man's shape and speech all troubled me. In my mind's eye, I seemed to see him pace about the weary moors, continually wandering about alone and silently, while I these thoughts within myself pursued. He, having made a pause, the same discourse renewed. So, while this man was talking, the Wordsworth pictured this lonely place, the old man, his shape, his speech, whatever he had seen in him, and whatever he now knew about him, and it all started to trouble him. In his mind's eye, he saw that endlessly this man is roaming the moors and he's collecting these leeches, wandering about alone and silently, and while he was thinking these thoughts, the old man was simply taking a pause, and he renewed his discourse. He once again spoke about his life and what he does day after day. Wordsworth is in deep thought here, and now it's in the last stanza that he will tell us that yes, then I came to some sort of resolution about my own problems. And soon with this he other matter blended, cheerfully uttered with demeanor kind, but stately in the main. And when he ended, I could have laughed myself to scorn to find in that decrepit man so firm a mind. God, said I, be my help and stay secure. I'll think of the leech gatherer on the lonely moor. This is where Wordsworth comes to a resolution. But the way he writes this piece, it is very interesting to note that he does not clearly state what he exactly learned from the leech gatherer. He does say that he feels this man was sent to me to scold me, but he does not really clearly lay out the lesson that he learned. Now, why does he feel that this man was sent to scold me? One way of looking at it, at the situation, is that Wordsworth thought that here I am, I'm a great poet, I have great thoughts, I pen them, and I look at nature, I feel so happy about things. Sometimes I doubt things, sometimes I feel that I need to explore them more, and at other times I'm sad. But this is a wonderful life, and sadness perhaps is a part of my life. And it's okay that we have to deal with these issues in our life because this is how life is. Imagine if I were to be this leech gatherer. God, would I be able to live at this age doing something which is as arduous, doing something which is so hazardous, doing something in a very lonely fashion, in a way that one has to muster a lot of strength, which in this age perhaps the old man doesn't have. So imagine if I had a life like him. God, thank God that I don't have this life, and I should be happy. I should count my blessings. This is one lesson perhaps which Wordsworth took, which he does not mention here, that I should count my blessings, that in so many ways I have a wonderful, beautiful life. There are things that I've done that I need to be proud of. There are friends that I've made that I need to be feeling that I'm very lucky that I have these friends, this family, or this particular vocation called poetry. I need to respect my life more. Another way of looking at it could be that he uses this line that in this decrepit who was so broken down, who was so run down, a man who did not even have a proper backbone to stand upon, and he was so beaten by old age, that he had a very firm mind. The way he spoke, the stately speech, the solemn words, the wonderful structure, Wordsworth perhaps took a lesson that look at this man, he's so firm in his thought. I'm the one who's doubting his position, that he's on the moor, he's gathering these leeches, perhaps he cannot do it, but he's very firm. This is what I will do day after day, this is what I'm born to do. And this decrepit man, there was such firmness of thought, which he felt sometimes escaped him, which he felt sometimes he did not come to, that there was too much doubt in his life, and he felt that he did not have the firmness of mind, which he perhaps appreciated in the old man. Now look at another line in this stanza. First, the stanza starts to say that the old man continued with his speech, and then with one matter he blended another matter, and he started to speak about his life. But everything was very cheerfully said and with demeanor kind. So the man was kind, he was cheerful, he wasn't complaining about his life like Wordsworth was complaining about his own. So this was the lesson that he took from him, that despite whatever struggles I see in this old man's life, he is not complaining at all. It's with a very cheerful demeanor, stately in the main, and he spoke in a stately fashion as if he owned the world. And when he ended, I would have laughed myself to scorn to find in that decrepit man so firm a mind. Here again, Wordsworth introduces a sort of interpretation which can be two ways. One, he was scorning himself. The poet is thinking or laughing at himself in scorn that look at this person, despite so many hurdles, despite such a bodily condition, he still has firmness of mind. In another way, he perhaps could also scorn the old man, in the sense that what makes you so firm about this thought that you're born to gather these leeches, or that this is the only vocation that you could do? Are you sure that you have thought this through? And perhaps then he leaves it open. He doesn't really clarify which side of things he's at. So I'll repeat, he basically is saying that he could have laughed himself to scorn, but that scorn could be aimed either at the poet or at the subject of the other subject of the poem, which is the old man. That Wordsworth scorned himself, that he's speaking so cheerfully, he's speaking so happily, and I'm the one who's doubting my life despite all the wonderful things that I have happening around me. But in another way, he would have scorned the leech gatherer as well, that what a life. I'm so glad I don't have a life like you. And then he said, God, I will not complain anymore. And you please keep me secure, you please help me. Because whenever I start to feel that there is something missing in my life, I'll think of the leech gatherer on the moon, on the moor, not on the moon, sorry. I will think of the leech gatherer on the moor, and I would tell myself, thank God I don't have a life like this guy. So he leaves this open. He doesn't clearly state the lessons that he drew from this experience, but he very strongly says that This man was sent by nature to him to teach him a lesson. Appreciate your life, understand that sadness is a part of it, and understand that whatever you are living right now is a blessing. And imagine if you were to be this leech gatherer on the lonely wall. God forbid. So this was his resolution, and then independence from this thought, this disturbing thought that why is life full of so much of sadness? Resolution and independence, William Wordsworth. Thank you.